Sean Sheehan, thank you so much for bringing me to your favourite bar, which is Mayo Rourke's. And I wrote this down in Clashmore, County Waterford. Is there a bit of dispute, maybe, about the county boundary?
So technically, yes. It's quite funny. I'll give you an example of it. Because it's within two Garda sections, one from County Cork and one from County Waterford. And where the pub actually lies is right in between the two. So it's a neutral zone.
A demilitarization zone, as they would have said.
Demilitarization, yeah. So it's there's a little river beside the pub. So the Cork Garda come as far as the river on one side, and the Waterford Garda come to the other side. So it's almost like a neutral zone when the two of them meet, So the pub gets away with an awful lot.
Honest to God, and we do get a lot of people internationally zoning into this and having a peek around at what's going on, and that wouldn't be terribly unique in Ireland. That type of thing in 2025. But it looks like a place where they play a bit of music. It looks like a place that's organically grown over the years. So why is it your favorite bar?
Look, I suppose the Clashmore for me is home. I'm currently in County Limerick, but no matter where I've been in the world and in all my travels, when I lived in the US and lived in the UK and kind of dotted around Ireland, every time I go home, you can walk into the bar. There's friends there. There's friends sitting there. There's always something exciting going on. I know the owners of the pub, and I knew their fathers and grandfathers back down through the years when I was a younger person. So it's always got that kind of unique appeal, that you can go in there. There's always someone you're going to know at the bar, having a bit of a crack. Generally, at the weekends, you're going to get some really entertaining gigs in there. Definitely a few funny stories. Like a local farmer with his pet sheep that thought it was a dog, entered it into a dog competition, just as a joke, and ended up winning it. So brought the sheep into the pub afterwards on the Sunday afternoon or Sunday evening for a pint of Guinness. So
honestly,
yeah.
when you watch these programs on Netflix about Ireland and even Scotland and places like that, rural places, and if you were to put that up, people wouldn't believe it.
Yeah,
they wouldn't believe it. A sheep wins a dog competition.
Yeah. Definitely interesting one.
That definitely is. But before we move off it, obviously one of the things you've said, and maybe this is a changing thing, where people don't even know their neighbours, never mind who's in a pub. But you often find, and I live in Wicklow here, and you go down and you be hanging around sort of the market and all the rest of it. People talk about stuff that happened 40 years ago. Like, do you remember that famous great hurler or great footballer? And somehow you come away with a sense of sort of warmth and glow of a place having a bit of history. I'm sure there's lots of history in Clashmore, and particularly that border thing. I'd say that's got a few tales.
Yeah, 100%. Look, there's the to be fair, the place is steeped in history. We could stay here all night chatting about that. I'll give you a very quick, brief overview, right? So Clashmore, once upon a time, was the estate of the Earl of Huntingdon, aka Robin Hood.
Really?
Yeah. So just at the back of that pub, and kind of, I suppose there was the old entrance into the estate. So as a kid growing up, we always had that one. We'd go and play in Robin Hood's field.
Did you steal the apples and then give them down to the poor?
Well, the poor young lads who couldn't reach them, maybe, right? But
they were always great for the hooshing up, though.
That's it. Look, it's I suppose, look, more currently, it is home to probably one of the best hurlers in the country at the moment at Tyke de Burka, right? So he would have frequented the bar for a glass of water occasionally.
Well done.
Well,
Well done. Well done. Excellent.
Yeah,
You've saved him from some penance.
absolutely. Yeah.
That's great. It's great to hear that a place that's still alive. Even as you say, there's probably hours that we could talk about it. But let's get back and say about your own self. So you're trying to stay productive. It's a Monday morning at 8:30. How do you do it?
Yeah, for me, I think, look, it's always, I suppose, been drilled into me, right, since I was a young age, about, and it's going back to a term, being useful, right, being busy, idle hands and all of that stuff. I think for myself, I've always been motivated. So what gets me, turned on in life, for want of a better term, is, what's next, right? What project can I work on? What can I research on? What's going to make things better? What's going to make my life easier? And strangely enough, it is a group of close friends, and we were actually in the pub not that long ago around Christmas, talking about this, where there was a few of us coming from, obviously travels from Australia, Germany, and generally we'd meet up on Stephen's Day and have a little reconnection. All of us, we were saying about the type of mindset that we have about wanting to do better, about wanting to take things to the next level. It's almost like a competition between us, but not, right? who's done best in the career,
Yeah.
And
yeah,
it always goes back to that. It's kind of thinking about how useful am I being within my role. What levels can I take it to? Going to be honest, there's a little bit of friendly competition with my brother, who's very, very successful. So I'm always trying to do one better than him.
Okay. That always helps. If there's only one piece of bread on the table, you got to work on ways.
Yeah. Again, like, it's always been the case of each little step, right? I always look at things from I suppose almost like an engineering mindset, right? Of how do you build a platform for success? So each little step and each little stone that you build on the foundation of that is your platform for future success. If you want to launch a rocket into the future, you start with the small stuff, and each step is going to be a step towards that success. So I'm continually looking to do that, continually looking to improve on it. It's a thirst for knowledge as well, right?
And that's the truth. I remember meeting a guy about 25 years ago, and incorrectly on my part, he said, I'm in the cement business. And I said, well, that's not very exciting. He says, I love it. I love every part of it. I love everything about it. It may not be very sexy, but it's very important. And, that's the key thing. Find a passion, even if it is sand, cement, and lime, or water and lime, or whatever. But as you were talking, I was just thinking that was it Edmund Hillary? Was he the first dude that went up the top of Everest?
Everest, yeah.
He was. And the interviewer afterwards was saying to him, so you were there, you're the highest man ever to climb, you're the top of the world. What did you think when you were up the top? He said, I had a look around and I saw that there was a higher peak across the way. And I said, I wonder, could I climb that? So that's what you're saying there about sort of, it's when you stay in the same place or doing the same stuff for a while, something doesn't, it goes, because we're all creatures of habit, are we? We are. We allow ourselves.
Yeah. I look, I think it's that look, it's going back into, I suppose, as a kid, right? And you be of a similar age, I guess, right?
Don't let them know hair.
Looking at looking at things like Knight Rider and all these things where MacGyver even, right? There was all of these advancements, and like wondering, I remember a program Beyond 2000 and thinking, geez, I'd love to do that stuff. I need to be that person. I'd love to go and figure out how these things work, right? Which is probably one of the reasons why there was never TV, radio, or VCR in our house that wasn't pulled apart and put back together.
Is that right? You were that guy, were you?
I was that guy.
Wow.
I'm going to be honest. I got it from my dad, right? So my dad, he he was a mechanical engineer, and I got the wonderful job. I'm the youngest of a family of five. I got the job of polishing the spanners and making sure they were clean. In other words, sitting out there while he was looking after me. Um, and it was at an age
I thought
where,
that was only me.
yeah, yeah, it was at an age, right, where you know I I guess whether I liked it or not, I was learning, right. So I was continually seeing what he was doing. Part of his role, he'd worked for Renault, he'd worked for Ford, and a couple of others in the design department, and worked for racing as well. So he was always, building rally cars or building race cars or looking at engines, turbos, everything, right? But it was at a time when electronics were starting to become a bigger part of cars.
Mm.
Um, and my brother he's a technician, electronic engineer, who was also pulling things apart and putting it back together. So there's two of us at it. But it was just that curious nature. How does it work? How can how do I fix it? How do I put it back together? How can I make something better? And it's continued with me, right?
But Sean,
So,
it does. I would have been to your point. Tomorrow's World was my favorite program from one
yeah,
end of the week to the next.
yeah,
But I knew my limitations on terms of I wanted to be able to use those things for betterment, whatever that was. But I was always the guy that would desire to take stuff apart, but always ended up with four pieces at the end that didn't seem to fit anywhere.
yeah,
Um, but then you realize, because my dad was a mechanic as well, and one of the things he used to always do was when he was dismantling a car, was they'd have like little trays
yeah,
for the stuff. So the components, all the components for, I don't know, a sump go in there. All the components for a gearbox go in there. Whereas I just go at it.
yeah.
That often your intention, you need to have that
Yeah.
process, don't you?
Yeah, I think that was definitely another thing I learned from my dad was, um, along with some foreign languages while he was at it, was a process, right? It was
Yeah.
a process to do something the right way. Definitely, a person that was big on process. That it's, and again, let's call it was my first at probably 5 or 6 years of age. It was my first knowledge of what lean is, what we call lean today,
Okay.
where it's a process to save time. It's done this way because this is the right way, and I suppose correct way. It is the most time efficient way of doing something, right? So I think along those life lessons that my dad taught me,
Yeah.
was one of them was following a process, because it's the way to do something correctly.
And we had a couple of years ago, we had a guest that was a farmer's son. And it was fascinating because I wouldn't know farming bar what I get down in the grocery store, that the food. But it was to the point that he was talking about in farming, without any question, you get out what you put in. And you
Yep.
must put in at the right time, because if you start putting the seeds down in December or January, it's too late. So it wasn't just about process, it was actually about the right time, the right stuff, and the right time. And then don't forget to, and he said this was the most important thing, at the right time, take out the dock leaves. And he is very successful in business now, and he is equating the dock leaves to, if you see something's not right or a person's not right, pluck them.
Yeah.
And similar to you, what you're saying, if a ball bearing looks worn, don't put it back into the engine,
Yeah.
because guess what? It doesn't make it any less worn, and it's going to cause a problem. So, who did and what was it the kindest thing anyone has ever done for you?
Um, I suppose, look, I'm going to go back a couple of years, right, to a mentor of mine, right. It's a very simple thing, I suppose. It was at a time I was doing an internship, and it's kind in one sense, but it gave me a little bit of motivation to do something else. I was doing an internship with a company, and won't mention the name, right, but they were well known for being tight. Put it that way.
Okay, all right.
So I was in doing my own unpaid internship. Now I did learn a lot. Had a great mentor, absolutely fantastic. And I do remember when it was coming up to the end of it, they would have a kind of an annual closure, right? So they shut down for 2 weeks for kind of summer break. It's got back 20 odd years ago or more, you know, or 25 years, 26 years ago. And I remember going out, and it was, you know, the day we were breaking up, and I guess came back in, he was all talking, I've got something for you. And, you know, I thought at that time it was a little bit of a, you know, bonus package. As I said, it was an unpaid internship, and I thought, hey, you know, maybe he's going to give me a couple of quid here, you know, for the 2 weeks holidays. She was talking about the great job I was doing and how fantastic it was, and some of the great ideas I had come up with. And you know, he reached into a plastic bag and pulled out a chalk ice. Where in the funny sense, the kindest thing he ever did for me was give me a chalk ice and tell me how fantastic I had done. But it's a kindness of twist, right? It taught me two things. It taught me, number one, how valuable you can be to a company, and knowing your own worth, right? There you go. And number two, because the person actually gave me an absolutely glowing reference that led into some great stuff in my career, was no matter how tough or how challenging, we'll say, a conversation like that can be, you have to look at the bright side, right? You have to look at what is the positive coming out of that conversation or that situation, right? So it was a kindness because it set me up to understand that not everyone is going to think like me. You know, but it also set me up. It gave me that resiliency to kind of deal with those challenges and how it impacts me, right? So where it's a twist of kindness, we'll put it that way, right? But it's
it could, and looking back, it could have been worse. It could have been a cornetto.
True.
It could have been a cornetto. But yeah. Sean, it's been short and sharp. We've covered generations, we've covered geographies, we've covered a lot, but it's been really interesting. And thank you for bringing me to your favorite bar. And also, welcome to Digital Infrastructure Ireland. And thank you for joining us. It's our pleasure.
Thanks very much, Gary. It's an absolute pleasure to be part of this today, and a pleasure to be part of Digital Infrastructure Ireland as well. Looking forward to the future.
Thanks, Sean. See you later.
Thanks, Gary. Bye-bye.